Hello, everyone, on this warm spring-like afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the February 2026 program of the League of Women Voters Lunch and Learn. I'm Paula Urick, a co-chair of the Planning Committee for Lunch and Learn. And just a few announcements before we get started. Please mute your audio and turn off your video so we can focus on our speaker. We use the chat function for questions, so please type your remarks there. We will monitor the chat and relay questions to our speakers. And for those of you who are joining us who are not league members, we welcome you, and let us know in the chat what prompted you to join us today and some special interests you may have. Okay, our program today will spotlight identifying and forecasting sources of jail crowding. In case you didn't know, for over 100 years, the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, has encouraged informed and active participation in government, worked to increase participation in the understanding of major public policy issues, and influence public policy through education advocacy. Membership is open to all. For further information, you can go to www.lincolnleague.org. League of Women Voters, Lincoln-Lancaster County is proudly nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government. Videos of previous lunch and learns are available on the League's website, again, lincolnleague.org/and-learn-schedule. Now we'll be starting today's program, and introducing our speaker will be Judy Kelly.
Thank you, Paula. I just have one note, which is when Paula says that the League is open to everyone, that doesn't mean just women. We also have male members, including our tech wizard, Jim Johnson. We are honored to have Zachary Hamilton as today's Lunch and Learn speaker. Dr. Hamilton is a professor at the University of Nebraska-Omaha School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. He specializes in risk and needs assessment and correctional program evaluation, which is what he did for the Lincoln-Lancaster County Justice Council in an assessment of the overcrowding at the Lancaster County Jail. A native of Ankeny, Iowa, he received his bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa and his master's and PhD from Rutgers University in criminology and criminal justice. He began his career working for the Center for Court Innovation in New York City before becoming a professor at Washington State University. We thank Dr. Hamilton for his important work and welcome him to Lunch and Learn. Dr. Hamilton.
Excellent. Thank you. I forgot I gave you such a long introduction of my background. So I guess I don't have to say much more. But I'm Zach Hamilton. I'm happy to be here to present on a recent project that I completed with one of my graduate students, John Ursino. I'm going to load some slides so you all can see them. And essentially, what I'm going to go through today is sort of the highlights of really a 2-year project that we did examining the jail trends within Lancaster County and providing some recommendations for the county as well. I have a fair amount of slides to get through, but I believe there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions if you have them. So just to give a brief introduction, the jail opened in 2013, and it actually opened in response to a growing population. There was crowding within the previous jail, and after the new jail opened, what was noticed was that the population continued to increase. It's increased so much, in fact, that females are now housed outside of the county in Washington County, where there's a little bit extra space. Lancaster County contracted with an agency that I work for within UNO called the Nebraska Center for Justice Research. We went through a 3-phase project. I'm going to go through each one of those phases as we work through this presentation. The first phase was simply estimating the jail population and any trends. Then we tried to examine what was causing the growth of the jail population. We then sought to examine whether or not we could find a consensus within the stakeholders to try to reduce the average daily population of the jail. And what we came up with was some additional strategies in which we could forecast what the likelihood of those strategies would be in terms of their success. And so I'm going to go through all of those elements here today. But before, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background. I do teach statistics, and I promise not to bore you too much with statistics, but a lot of what I'm going to be showing you has to do with statistical findings. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. What you're seeing in this figure is referred to as a time series analysis. Time series analysis, you might be familiar with them. It's essentially a line chart. Sorry, someone speaking to me? No? Okay. Sorry. A um, a time series is essentially a line chart where you can see that blue line identifies the average daily population, and it's aggregated up to the month. So it's really the monthly population of the jail. On the vertical axis, you see those numbers going up. That's the number of people or individuals within the jail. And you can see how that line jumps around a little bit as it moves left to right. You can see the dates of when the jail opened or shortly thereafter, following all the way through to the end of our study period, which was August 1st, 2023. Essentially, what a time series is a sequence of data points, and we're recording the jail population at regular intervals. So we recorded it daily, and then we averaged it up monthly so that we could smooth out that line a little bit. When you see that term at ADP, essentially that means the average daily population. So that's the population that was recorded at the beginning of each day within that jail. What we like to look for within a time series to try to identify where trends are occurring or where changes are happening are what are called mirrored trends. Mirrored trends essentially mean that the overall ADP, which is still that blue line, can reflect some other subpopulations or subcategories of the larger population. And what you can see there inside that red box is a highlight of a mirrored forecast or a mirrored series, where you can see the blue line, which is the overall population, is sort of bouncing around or increasing at the same rate as that subpopulation, which is a group of individuals that were released from the jail to NDCS. This essentially highlights those potential causes of growth when you find those mirrored trends. What we also like to look for within a time series is what's called points of inflection. Essentially, where does a trend change where you can see not just a bouncing around sort of an equilibrium, but really a dramatic change in growth or decrease even within a population. So with that sort of background in mind, these are sort of the basic jail trends of your Lancaster County Jail. Essentially, we're looking at that monthly aggregated average daily population. The jail opened in late 2013. Our data started January 1st of 2014. What you can see is that there was a rather large drop in that ADP there was a large drop in that ADP just after COVID, which that red line is really indicating right around March of 2020. Right before COVID, the average daily population was right around 650 individuals. That peaked in March of 2020 at 670. What you can see is the drop occurring as social distancing and other policies were created to reduce that jail population during that heightened COVID period. And so the ADP during that COVID period was roughly 500 individuals, and it dropped down to its lowest in May of 2020 with 445. It then rebounded, and after those COVID restrictions were loosened, the peak ADP or ADP continued to grow, and post-COVID, it peaked at 753. You can see with that red arrow there. What we've estimated, and what I'm going to show you in detail, is that the jail is set to reach its peak capacity in 2026. So this year, but later this year. The Lancaster County Jail population growth has a couple different drivers. So typically when you look at any sort of incarceration facility, whether it be a jail or a prison, there's two primary drivers. Either there's more people coming in or there's less people leaving. For Lancaster, it's less people leaving. And specifically, it's what we've identified as a felony pretrial population in which those individuals are being detained and staying longer. What we've identified and what we're going to go into a little bit more detail about is that the case processing times of these individuals that are being held pretrial has been increasing dramatically, slowly but substantially, over the course of many years. What I'm also going to show you is that we've ruled out several different causes that were thought to be some of the root causes and really focused in on this one specific population.
Excuse me,
So,
Dr. Hamilton.
sure, go ahead.
Judy. We've had a request to see if you could enlarge the size of your slides. Are you able to do that?
Large the inside of my size of my screen?
Yeah, of the slides on our screen. Yeah.
Huh. Is there, can you tell me, is there like black strips on the left and right?
Yes.
Okay, that's why. Okay. Let me see if I can do that.
I think that's work.
That's larger.
That's larger, but
Yeah, I know you have your slides on the side.
see on the side. That's okay though. If you all are okay with this and it's larger, then I'll go with it.
Okay.
How about some thumbs up, audience? It's helpful.
Okay. All right. So with regards to the felony pretrial length, what we're seeing here is your average daily population. The blue line at the top, that represents everybody in total. The green and the orange lines below are subpopulations of that larger blue line. The green line represents the pretrial ADP, or those that are within the jail but being held pretrial before the adjudication or sentencing of their particular offense. The orange line represents individuals that were convicted typically of misdemeanors and sentenced and are now serving their sentence within the Lancaster jail. So those are two distinct populations. One being held pretrial that hasn't been sentenced, that may be held for a felony or a misdemeanor. The orange is those that have been sentenced and are now serving their time of that conviction within the Lancaster County Jail. With regards to the sentence, that orange line ADP, what we can see is that it's been declining. It was roughly 44% of the population pre-COVID, and it's now 39% post-COVID. So you've actually seen a decline in the percentage of that population over time, and particularly post-COVID. What you can see inside that red box is that the pretrial ADP has been increasing. It was roughly stable pre-COVID at roughly 500 individuals. And then post-COVID, it sort of mirrors that overall growth of the population. The main takeaway here is that that sentenced ADP is stable, and that pretrial length is really a root cause of that ADP growth. What we can also see is when we dig out a little bit deeper is that we see that some of the cause is really with regards to what we call length of stay. So that LOS acronym represents length of stay. What you can see is the vertical red line represents when COVID occurred, and then the red horizontal lines represent the average pre-COVID and the average post-COVID, left and right of that line respectively. Before COVID, the average days that somebody was held in jail was 22, and then post-COVID was 28. Overall, that doesn't seem like a huge increase of roughly 6 days, but remember this is across a very large population. And when you have a subset of that population that's really driving that LOS up, it tends to impact the growth pretty dramatically. What we can see in terms of length of stay when we go back to this ADP chart is that those individuals that are staying longer are really driving that growth as well. So what we've identified here within this time series, the blue line again represents everybody, but now we've broken down our green and our orange line to represent two different populations. The green line represents those with longer stays that we've defined as anybody that's staying 54 days or longer. Anybody that's staying less than 54 days, those individuals are identified with that orange line. That's everybody else. What you can see within that red box is that green line is roughly stable prior to COVID. Post-COVID, though, you can see that mirrored growth is there again. Where the green line increases, so too does the overall population growth. You don't see the same thing within the orange line as it actually decreases, stays pretty flat, and continues to remain at sort of a stable rate. What we looked at next was looking at that average daily population of those that were sentenced versus those that were pretrial. And you can see that the blue line represents, sorry, this is the difference between felony pretrial and misdemeanor pretrial. So what really was the pretrial population causing that growth? The blue line represents your felony population, and the green line represents those that are being held on a misdemeanor offense. As you can see that green line, the misdemeanor pretrial population was less than 100 ADP, and over time it's actually reduced as well. The misdemeanor sentence population has also reduced to less than 50 of the ADP. And really all you can see is the growth of that felony population, and it is gradual and slow over time. And there is that dip for COVID around March of 2020. However, the growth is really being driven by that felony pretrial, not the misdemeanor pretrial population. What we can also see, and this is one of the slides that I used in my introduction, was that there's a particular part of that felony population that's grown pretty dramatically post-COVID. Felony convictions, or those individuals that are convicted of a more serious offense, are released from the Lancaster County Jail and processed and placed within one of the prison facilities by the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services, or NDCS. The release to NDCS, or releases to NDCS, grew post-COVID at an average with an average days of 325. So those individuals that are being held pre-trial before their conviction are being held almost a year prior to that conviction. Before COVID, this was roughly 100 days. Post-COVID, it's roughly 400 days. And so the felony pretrial population is really what we've drilled down to as identifying that primary driver of population growth. We tried to look as well to see if there's particular felony sentences that are causing that pretrial population to be driven up as well. So we've broken down this time series by particular felony types. Felony types range from felony 1 all the way up to a felony 4. There's also a felony 2, 3, and 3A. As you go from felony 1 all the way up to felony 4, felony 4 is sort of the least serious of the offenses. What you can see within these lines, and I'm sorry, there's a lot of them, is each one of those lines represents a different type of felony. Where you can see that felony 4 line at the very top, that's your light blue line, that really mirrors our overall population growth, and you can see its growth post-COVID. There's also a little bit of growth within those felony 3As. There's a small increase post-COVID. Some of the primary offenses for felony 4s, most of them are possession of a controlled substance, so those are your drug offenses. Whereas those felony 3As typically are terroristic threats, DUIs, domestic violence, assaults as well. But for the most part, it's these two types of felony offenses that really grew by about 50% post-COVID. Oh, these are the red boxes that I have to highlight those mirrored growth patterns as well. Okay, so once we dug through and really got to the bottom of what was causing that jail population growth, we tried to look outside the jail to see what's causing those changes. A jail in any correctional or justice system represents sort of one cog in a larger justice machine, which has inputs and outputs from other sources. So what we tried to look for were what are causing those inputs, or what's causing those pretrial populations to drag on longer than they used to. So we really focused in on court processing times within that pretrial population. This external data analysis essentially went outside of the jail data to examine processing time by calculating each case, identifying when the case was opened all the way through the disposition date, or when essentially that case was closed. Case processing times were examined by sentence outcome as well. And we also identified if a pretrial stay transitions from pretrial jail and then sentenced to jail, or pretrial jail at Lancaster through NDCS sentence. What we found was that the length of those case processing times increased pretty dramatically. And these actually started to increase pre-COVID, right around 2019. 2019, we saw sort of a change in the administration of many of the court processing and many of the court workers in terms of the prosecuting attorneys, as well as many of the assistants as well. Case processing time at that particular point had increased and flattened out right around 2020, but still has an upward trend to it. This point of inflection is really unrelated to COVID, and it's really been difficult to identify what sort of dramatic change has occurred to the population that caused that inflection point. We try to examine felony pretrial cases, and again, this has a lot of different lines on it, but each one of these lines represents a different type of offense. So you can see weapons are in red, green is violence, theft and fraud is purple, blue is drug offenses, and orange represent other offenses. And what we looked at here was essentially what was the percent of the average daily population, and one particular population growing over time. What we found, similar to a previous slide, was that most of the increase is due to drug offenses. And many of these drug offenses, these pretrial felony drug offenses, grew in terms of their duration post-COVID. The average is over 15% of the ADP for just drug offenses. There is a small growth in some of the other offenses. This other category is sort of a catch-all bucket for ones that don't fit neatly into the other categories. But typically these include sex offenses, which are often infrequently charged, but tend to have lengthy pretrial durations. And these really drive up the average as well, even though there's very few of them. The remaining crime types, your weapons, violent, and theft and fraud offenses, tend to stay pretty flat across the entire period or maybe even decrease by comparison. There's the red box highlighting the point at which that increase occurred. So given that we found that it was drug offenses and the pretrial felony drug offenses in particular, we tried to look at the average number of days related to these cases. Again, starting around 2019 is when we saw this dramatic growth that started to occur. It was a sharp increase that continued through 2020. And the average was roughly 320 days post-COVID that somebody would be held pre-trial within the Lancaster jail on a drug-related case. What we can also see is the case processing time increased by sentence as well. So you can see the orange line represents those that are sentenced to jail after their conviction versus those that are transferred to prison or Nebraska Department of Correctional Services. While both are growing over time, there's a more dramatic growth, particularly with that point of inflection for the NDCS cases. Those cases grew by an average of 1 year in terms of their case length. This increased post-2019, where pre-COVID, it was roughly an average of 344 days, and post-COVID, it's 518 days, so over a year for those individuals that eventually get transferred to NDCS. Jail cases average about 300 days. They also increased post-2019, going from 228 days to 348 days. But it's a much larger increase for those felony cases in which an individual is sentenced to prison. We also tried to examine and rule out certain elements so that we did not have specific tunnel vision on this pretrial growth. We tried to identify particular things that were not the cause. So one of the things that we were examining is if people are staying longer, are there also more people coming in the front door that are causing this growth? And what we found was that that was not the case. We looked at the number of new bookings into the jail each month. And what you can see from this blue overall trend is that jail admissions had been decreasing before COVID. There's a sharp decline during COVID. It rebounds a bit, but really just rebounds to the point at which it was before COVID. So the number of bookings has decreased over time. Without showing you all of the figures, we also looked at mental health competency applications to see whether or not there was greater issues of individuals being held within the jail that had mental health issues. We did not see any increase there. Non-drug offenses did not increase over this time period. There was also during this period an extended use of drug courts and other specialty courts within the jurisdiction. There was a concern that maybe there was a higher failure rate that was causing these individuals to come back to jail after being released. That was not the case. We actually found that those drug courts and specialty courts were very effective in reducing the jail population. And the increase in the jail population was also not a reflection of shorter stays. So we've been focused on those longer pretrial felony stays. There was also shorter stays of individuals that were actually decreased over time. And in particular, this was a strategy that was put forth by the jail administrator, the jail director, in which what they identified was a way to create pre-arraignment bonds, essentially letting people out with very, very low-level crimes with little to no bond amount that's being provided. Those individuals were often turned around or released after booking in less than 1 day. What we can also say is that it's not due to individuals not being able to pay their bail or their bond. Looking across time, this is a time series where the bond amount is indicated there on the far left axis, where you can see the dollar amounts that increase. As you look across time, you can see that bail bond amount decreased. There was a sharp increase during COVID, and then it actually started to decrease post-COVID again. And really just gets back down to that equilibrium point before COVID. Our overall analysis of this is that bail amounts are relatively stable, and there's actually signs of reductions. However, we do have some data limitations within some of this court data, so it is difficult to dig into some of the pieces. And it is some of the recommendations that we've provided to the courts in order to process their data with better accuracy going forward. So with that in mind, what we did next was we gathered together the individuals that, or the courtroom work group, essentially, and the jail to identify who were the people that could most impact this jail growth. In particular, we got together prosecuting attorneys, we got together the defense attorneys. We also brought in jail administrators as well to really dig in deep about what sort of solutions could we hash out to find a way to decrease that jail population over time and make sure that we don't hit that maximum. And so what we did was we forecasted the future. Essentially looking at the prior patterns and the prior growth. It sort of gets truncated a little bit, but it represents just that solid blue line on the left side of the screen. That's everything that we've been looking at so far in terms of the growth and ADP within the Lancaster County Jail. The red dashed line essentially represents our prediction going forward. So if everything stays at the same rate, we're still going to see those ebbs and flows over time. And at a certain point in time, we will reach the maximum capacity of the jail. Now, there might be an ebb and flow that pokes out ahead of the ADP and comes back down again. That's referred to as seasonality. Typically, jail populations grow during warmer months and decrease during colder months, which is reflected in sort of the bouncing of that line across time. But what we do see is that there's a sustained growth that will break that ADP ceiling of the jail in September of 2026. So essentially the jail will be at or higher than capacity at roughly the month of September this year. Knowing that, what we identified was that there were a couple different strategies that the court was willing to entertain. The first was implementing what's called a pretrial risk assessment. A pretrial risk assessment essentially identifies individuals that are coming into the jail. It catalogs their prior criminal history, their employment, and any sort of other related factors that might contribute to whether or not that individual is going to show up for their court dates or not, which is considered a failure to appear, or whether or not that individual might commit another offense if they were released back to the community pre-trial. There's been some success with a particular tool called the Public Safety Assessment, or the PSA. And in other jurisdictions, the PSA has been able to find effective reductions within jail populations. In some of the best findings that it's found is that it can reduce a jail pretrial population by roughly 20%. What we followed is this forecast forward. So that red line still represents our forecast if nothing else happened, but now the green dash line essentially represents what would happen if we found a 20% reduction in your pretrial population. That would essentially slow the growth over time, but it wouldn't necessarily stop it from breaking that ADP ceiling. Essentially, we would break that ADP ceiling a little bit later, but it would not necessarily hold it back entirely. And you can see roughly in 2027 and 2028, you see that that ADP would still surpass its ceiling, even if we got the full 20% reduction out of that public safety assessment. So even though pretrial is a root cause, it's not necessarily the specific cause of this pretrial growth that's happening within Lancaster. So to get a little more specific, what we identified was trying to create a 20% reduction specifically in felony pretrial drug cases. And doing this within a graduated implementation fashion. So within the first year, try to reduce the processing time of these felony drug cases by 5%, and then in the next year by 10, the next year by 15, and following a fourth year of a 20% reduction. What we can see is that that green line actually stays below the red ADP ceiling. It flattens. And actually, if we extend this even further, the ADP actually starts to come down a little bit, reaching a breaking point within that equilibrium to where we would eventually have an ADP of 715 in 2026. This is essentially projecting a strategy of expediting sentencing and in particular, reducing that processing time before that sentencing occurs. We believe that this can also be completed or accomplished with a greater use of drug court, increasing the amount of individuals that are eligible to go and utilize drug court, limiting their exposure to the jail. And so with all of those elements outlined, I just wanted to wrap it up and provide you really our findings and recommendations that we provided back to the Lancaster County jail and court system. In particular, our summary findings is that the Lancaster jail is running out of space. It's running out of capacity. There's a limited number of bed spaces now. Many of those beds are not being used as intended. Some of them are specialty beds that are there for particular types of cases. The jail itself is sort of spaced out in terms of maximum, medium, and minimum security. And there's also specialty areas that really look at or help to identify treatment, intervention, program space, as well as spaces for individuals with mental health issues. Right now, because the jail is running out of space, we're sort of using some of those specialty areas or specially designed facility spaces to house everybody that's incarcerated or everybody that's being held pre-trial because there's limited space everywhere else. So it kind of limits the ability for the jail to function as it really should or the way that it was designed or intended. And really what we're finding is, as we've sort of described throughout, is that pretrial jail population is really increasing and increasing substantially. That jail population growth is due to longer pretrial lengths of stay. This is not due to increases of admission, and in particular, those pretrial lengths of stay around felony drug court cases. We believe that the jail will surpass its maximum capacity around September of 2026 and sort of remain above capacity if there's no solutions or strategies put forth. In terms of recommendation, we provided several recommendations back to the courts and to the jail, mostly focused around system processing. We believe that there's an opportunity for them to expand their day reporting centers. If you don't know, day reporting centers are essentially a place where an individual can be released pre-trial, but they're asked to come or check into the jail on a daily basis. These can be individuals that have specific issues such as mental health or substance abuse needs. And we believe if we expanded that capacity, including even individuals that have both mental health and substance abuse needs, considered dual diagnosis individuals, that you could reduce that population considerably. We also feel that there's a chance to expedite case processing. Many of the issues that were brought up around both the defense and prosecuting attorneys were around docket calls and continuances that occurred. Oftentimes, there'll be a call to court to sort of identify where the process is pre-trial and can a trial start. And many times, the judge will issue a continuance based on sort of the lack of readiness of one side or the other. Reducing those docket calls could reduce some of those issues. And possibly if there's a way to incentivize timely appearances to reduce those scheduling delays, that would definitely help the processing time as well. One of the major things that was brought up during sort of our discussions with the courtroom work group was that time for defense discovery timeline has really become more complex and grown longer in duration. The amount of time it takes for somebody that's incarcerated to have a drug test completed or get the results back. Oftentimes there's body cam footage, there's video footage, and all of that information has to be first examined by the prosecution and then provided through discovery to the defense. This process has taken longer over time, possibly right around that time of that inflection point back in 2019. There were some ideas in terms of accelerating that discovery timeline, but it is going to be a complex procedure going forward to reduce the time to discovery to get the trial moving faster. Finally, reviewing drug court eligibility criteria. As I mentioned, the drug courts seem to be very successful within Lancaster County. So expanding the individuals that could go to those courts, expediting the time it takes for someone to get a referral, and particularly to complete analysis of how changes in eligibility might impact that population going forward would be really helpful for reducing that population. Some other recommendations that we put forward as well in terms of data collection. Some of the ways that court records were collected over the last 5 to 10 years really need to be improved. Improved tracking would have helped our process. And so we made the recommendation to increase the detail about how bond payments are recorded and tracked, and if there are any reductions, to record when changes are added or dropped or reduced to particular charges or sentences that are provided to an individual, and giving greater flexibility in terms of evaluating the impact of new initiatives going forward. A lot of times it was hard to track down all the information that we needed to identify all those things that we ruled out. A lot of what we've been doing, or what I've been showing you, is really forecasting and monitoring a population. And this was a one-time process that we put forward. But we believe that if it was more routine, that these forecasts could have really great changes in terms of how they help dictate policy and changes going forward. For instance, if the court was privy to quarterly forecasts or quarterly monitoring of these trends, they might be able to nip things in the bud, keep those ADPs lower over time, or really see when they're starting to increase and when a policy change is needed. So monitoring those case processing times, admissions, releases, length of stays, that could be done on a continuing basis, or at least periodically updating those forecasts to identify that population going forward. Finally, there's more research to do. The county has implemented the public safety assessment. That's that pretrial risk assessment. That was actually in the process of being implemented as we were completing our research. We really push forward the recommendation to create a decision matrix so that it's not just sort of a checkbox that's being completed. Oftentimes within risk needs assessments like a pretrial assessment or the public safety assessment, it's viewed as something that court workers have to do rather than something that dictates their decisions and helps them work towards a goal. So incorporating the results of that tool and really making it a driver of how they're managing those decisions, we think is really important. Essentially linking the results of the tool to policy or to judges' decisions will help incorporate some of those issues and make the process a little bit better. We've also identified that some of those individuals that are released eventually get detained again if they have a failure to appear, they miss a court hearing. We recommended that be changed to incorporate more graduated sanctions, so it's not just one failure to appear and you're back being detained, that an individual might get more than one bite at the apple. We also suggested implementing what are called email and phone call reminders for appearances. This is usually an automated system, but if a court appearance is scheduled and a defendant has a number, a cell phone number that's registered with the court, email or even phone reminders can be sent to make sure that that individual shows up for that court appearance, reducing those failure to appears. Eventually, we would like to evaluate the performance of that public safety assessment, making sure that tool is working best for all populations in terms of race and gender and ethnicity, and really making sure that the decision-making data or the results of that tool is really being incorporated into how judges and prosecutors are making those release decisions and recommendations. And again, we suggest using performance measures to make sure that the tool is doing what it's supposed to, and increasing the buy-in so that judges and other parts of the prosecution and defense are really bought into how this tool is working and how it's trying to solve that ADP crisis that's really occurring. And that's all that I have for today. I'm happy to go back to another slide if somebody wants me to explain a little bit in more detail, but we still have another 20 minutes if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamilton. Excuse me. We have a couple of lengthy comments from our Lancaster County Public Defender in the chat. The first one is, it's important to remember that the entire pretrial population is presumed innocent. They have not been convicted of the offense. They are poor and unable to post the bond required. Many of the possession of controlled substance charges involve residue, not any substantial amount. Residue in a baggie, residue in a pipe or straw, residue on a scale. And then the second comment, people being held in jail are not provided with their police reports, sent to their attorneys through the discovery process by the county attorney's office until their cases are in district court. Felonies are filed in county court, and if the case cannot be resolved in county court, and if there are sufficient facts, which is probable cause, then the case is transferred to district court. The county attorney could provide police reports in county court. However, they do not do so, except in very rare cases. Why would anyone want to speed up their trial until they have had sufficient time to see all the reports, evidence, digital evidence, which the prosecutor has had access to from the get-go? And then Christy also said, Zachary, I am venting as the public defender and a voter. The county attorney's office has refused to agree to a shorter time period from the bind over month-long period, time of transfer from county court to district court, until a not guilty plea is entered at arraignment.
Good to hear from Christy. I hadn't seen her in a few months, so that's great. She was actually part of the courtroom work group that we collaborated with to try to provide some strategies for those forecasting issues. What she brings up are important points, and I do believe that what she's saying, there's definitely strong merit to what she's saying in terms of why would you want to speed up your court process or your trial. Our recommendations try to focus mostly on releasing people pre-trial to reduce that jail population. There's a lot of individuals that are being detained pre-trial rather than being released. And in terms of speeding up or slowing down the process, it actually wouldn't have an impact on the ADP if more of those individuals were allowed to be in the community awaiting sort of the resolution of their case. So I think a lot of what Christy's saying could be incorporated into some of those strategies that were discussed.
Paula Urick asked, have you compared pretrial delay to Supreme Court case progression standards?
We have not. That was not within sort of the parameters of our contracted deliverables. And so we tried to stay within them. That is interesting comment, and it could be definitely looked at. It just wasn't part of what we were focused on. But good question.
So I've asked the question, when you say that the courts are willing to consider, who is the courts? Because we had an article here in the Journal Star that said the courts didn't participate.
The prosecuting attorneys did. Pat Condon in particular was very involved. The judges, although we requested to meet with them and provide interviews or focus groups to gather their perceptions of what were causing delays, they were a group that did not sit down with us.
Why?
We didn't get an answer as to why. Just they did not respond to us, and they said that they did not want to sit for the interviews and focus groups.
Has there been an increase in drug activity or drug arrests in Lincoln and Lancaster County since 2019 when these pre-trial?
That's a very good question. We actually, not part of this presentation, but we did gather information from the Lancaster sheriffs as well as the Lancaster police. Sorry, the Lincoln Police and the Lancaster Sheriff's offices, and looked at crime patterns over time, and we actually saw that drug crimes actually decreased during this time period. It's really just the duration of time. They were relatively stable, but they did have a slight decrease to them, if I'm recalling correctly. But it's really just the processing times within individuals being held pre-trial that are really causing the increase. So it's not more people coming in the front door with drug offenses, it's people staying longer.
Would legislation legalizing recreational marijuana use significantly reduce the average daily population, do you think?
There's a good chance that it would. Yes, a lot of the offenses are offenses that are related to marijuana possession, but there are definitely many that are not. So it may or may not have a dramatic decrease on what we're seeing, but there's probably a potential to at least have some sort of small decrease within the jail population. It's just not something that we looked into or effectively forecasted going forward.
We have another question here from Rachel Mulcahy, actually a statement. There will be no increase in use of diversion without the county attorney's willingness to loosen the criteria for eligibility. Question, what is the status of adoption of the recommendations?
That is one thing that I don't know. So after we provided our recommendations, we've made ourselves available to be sure that if the county needed any more analysis or findings that we could provide, that we were available. Since our last presentation, which was August, I believe, might have been September, we have not received any sort of feedback or been contacted since. It's not to say that they're not working on something. It's just we haven't been involved since the last presentation.
So I happen to notice that the office holder of the county attorney's office changed in 2019. Could that have an impact on the increases that we're seeing in the average daily population?
It's possible. We had looked at that as well. It's really difficult to identify any sort of change in strategy or any really dramatic policy change that occurred specifically at that time, but that is a marker of that point of inflection in which there was a change in the prosecuting attorney.
Then we have, excuse me, what is the status of the decision matrix for PSA?
I do not know. The PSA was being implemented as we were conducting our research. We are familiar with the PSA and how it works. But each time the PSA is implemented, if you don't know what the PSA is, it's a pretrial risk assessment. It's about 9 items that score a lot of an individual's prior criminal history. And really what what it's used for is to identify individuals that could be released on their own recognizance, those that might be released with certain stipulations or conditions, and those that are recommended to be detained or provided a bail or a bond amount. Within that process, each jurisdiction is a little bit different. And so the PSA or the people that provide it, they're actually a philanthropic organization called the Arnold Ventures Foundation. And what they try to do when they implement is provide the local county or the local jail the ability to adjust that decision matrix to really account for what's the proportion of the population that they feel comfortable releasing on their own recognizance with conditions, and what's their sort of threshold that they feel comfortable detaining individuals using that scoring matrix. So that design matrix or decision matrix is really customized for each particular jurisdiction in which it's implemented. But I don't have any more information specifically about Lancaster's implementation.
Dr. Hamilton, would it be possible for you to stop sharing your screen?
Oh, sure.
That was one of the questions. From our public defender, the PSA process is stymied as of now until the judges and police department buy in. The police would need to be willing to pick up folks who violate. From Scott and Carla Larson, whether a judge's pre-bench litigation background is prosecution or defense does seem to impact how torts are viewed in sentencing. For example, every attorney Governor Heinemann pointed to judgeship, I believe about 20, was a prosecuting attorney first. I'm guessing sentencing on the longer end of guidelines would contribute to overcrowding as well. Are you aware of studies relating Nebraska judges' prior litigation history with their sentencing patterns?
Not. That's a little bit outside of my area of expertise. I mostly focus on corrections. So jails and prisons are really where my focus is, not on judicial decision making. There has been studies that have linked sort of a governor's political affiliation with sentence lengths and found that there is a relationship. I don't know that there's been anything specific related to Nebraska's appointments, though.
Crystal Fox asks, this was a great presentation. My question is, how do you or we use this info to help folks being held for these extremely long time periods?
I mean, that's a really good question. And given your sort of position as really a forward-thinking group, I would believe that it would be, sort of taking this information to stakeholders, meaning jail administration, legislators as well, to identify whether or not there's anything that can be provided in terms of resources or situational changes within policy that could prevent the jail from tipping over into that maximum capacity or hitting the ceiling of where they're at. I think one of the main drivers of what we were positioned to do was to provide alternatives, in which typically what has happened in decades past is that once a jail starts to get close to its maximum capacity, it's expanded or another jail is built. Given that one was constructed in 2013 and opened in 2014 because of that same issue, and the jail continued to grow in population, I think the powers that be or the people that contracted us felt that expanding or building a new jail was not only fiscally difficult, but also maybe not a really long-term solution. So I think a lot of what the driver of this could be the same driver of you all is the idea that the jail population needs to come down. Not necessarily a new jail needs to be expanded to allow for individuals to have more detention time.
Dick Votravers, question. You mentioned enhanced data collection. Do you suspect that charges are often reduced during the pre-trial process?
They are, and it was quite difficult with the data that we had. And it's really just a matter of using the data from the court system that was not designed for our research purposes. We did as much as we could, but a lot of the data that was contained within the court databases in terms of their charges as well as their bond amounts. There would be a starting value or a starting charge that would be overwritten over time. So really all we were able to see was the ending charge or the ending bond amount, not the changes or reductions that happened across the duration of the pretrial period. So I think it's really a matter of having sort of a system that just wasn't designed for our purposes, but it could be enhanced or improved.
We have another comment from our public defender. The legislators could stop creating more and more crimes and could stop increasing possible sentences except for violent offenses. We had a question that I asked for clarification on, and maybe it'll make more sense to you. When were your specifics given? And I don't.
Specifics like our deliverables for our contract?
I don't know. I'd asked if we could have that clarified.
Okay.
I don't know if it means.
Yes, yes.
What does it mean, Lana?
I don't know how to say it specifically, but they went to all this trouble, and I don't even know who they actually give that information to. But I was wondering when that was given.
Yeah, it was the city council that really was the driver of the contract that we were provided. David Durbin was our primary contact, but I think he was really just involved in getting the contract through. But it was really a city council process that went through. When we created the deliverables for what we would complete, we actually completed it in association with some other individuals. A group from a company called HDR were also involved. They had a different part and a different analysis, but it was actually sort of two contracts at once in which we were sort of given directives by the city council or from David Durbin to execute those elements. Once we finished, we then presented all of the findings back to the city council in a couple different presentations over the course of the contract. I hope that answers the question.
When was that? When did you do that?
When was the final presentation?
Yes.
It was, I want to say it was August, but it might have been September of 2025.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Hamilton, I believe that your client was the Lincoln-Lancaster County Justice Council.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Durbin is, I believe, the county clerk. So the Justice Council is made up of, as I understand it, criminal justice folks at both the city and the county.
Okay, thank you very much.
Christy, I know you sit on that. Is that an accurate description?
Dave Durbin works for the county commissioner, so he's the attorney who assists them. And it was at the request of the Justice Council. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, actually, I think we're out of time. Dr. Hamilton, thank you very much. The information you presented certainly prompted a lot of comments and questions. We appreciate the fact that we have somebody with your expertise looking at the really important issues in our community. Paula, you want to?
And this is Paula, just a quick announcement. Next month on March 5th, our presentation will be made by Noel Tonages on the topic of Respect Nebraska Voters Ballot Initiative. So we hope you can join us then. And anyone who is not currently a member of the League but is inspired to join us, again, go to lincolnleague.org to get more information on membership. Okay, are there any other announcements, Judy?
Oh, for days, but no, I think we're good.
All right. Again, thank you, Dr. Hamilton, for your presentation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we hope to have many of you join us again next month. Okay, thank you.